Should I bulk or cut? Now, as a brown guy, the context of bulking and cutting has to be applied with some kind of nuance because a lot of brown people they have skinny fat physiques and that can determine which way a person might decide to go. Now, in this video, I'll tell you why you need to be careful of if you decide to bulk or cut, especially as a brown guy. Now, why should you listen to me? For two main reasons. One of them, on a one transformation, I lost 20 pounds of fat without even dieting, just by using intermittent fasting. And on another one, I lost around 30 pounds of fat. And I've also gone aesthetic physique as well. And I've trained a lot of my friends in real life. I've taught them how to train, foundations of training. Now they've gone on to train on their own and they all have their own aesthetic physique. The main point which a lot of people make is if you look down and you see your stomach is protruding, then you need to cut. Now, for brown people, that is not 100%. The determining factor, or it shouldn't be anyway, because a lot of brown people, they have skinny fat physiques and their stomach might be big and it might be round, but it's not because they're overly fat. It's just how, the food and their hormones and their diets and culture and whatnot, that's basically what's made their stomach a bit fat. Now, they've probably got skinny arms, skinny legs. They're just literally skinny, but they've just got this brown belly. They've got this brown, skinny, fat, typical brown guy belly, and which is the worst thing ever because it makes a decision of if you should actually bulk or cut very hard, because then you get actual fat guys, right? They might not even be that fat, but because of the typical brown guy, diet and culture and whatnot, their stomach is really, really protruding and their arms are skinny, their legs are skinny. It's a very, very hard thing to do. The way I would decide on what you should do is you should kind of have a look in the mirror. And now, if you've been training for a while, or even if you've been training for a few months, you should think to yourself, okay, if I trimmed down and I lost loads of weight, would I look aesthetic? That's the only thing you need to think about. Now, if you look at yourself and you'll be like, you know what, I've got a little bit of muscle. I've been training for a few years, but I've got a little bit of muscle, right? Which is the case with a lot of brown guys because protein is not very prominent in the, Asian culture. But they're like, you know what, I've got a little bit of muscle. Then I would not advise them to cut. Now, if you're someone who's been training for a while, right, you're like an older person, you're about 30 or something, and you're like, you know what, I do have, I could feel the muscle underneath the fat, which is a case for a lot of people, right? Even overweight people, it doesn't have to be brown people. But a lot of overweight guys who go to the gym, they're like, you know what, I can feel muscle, like I can feel my back muscle, I can feel abs, I can feel, on my chest. Then for them, I would always, not always, but I would advise them to kind of trim down. If they're someone who's been fat for a while as well, especially, also trim down, you'll probably get some kind of, you definitely get testosterone boost because after a certain percentage, like 18-19%, your testosterone kind of lowers a bit because you're holding a lot of fat. It increases the estrogen, and what that does is obviously you become a bit more feminized. You probably have some kind of man boobs. Muscle gain is a bit slower. There's a lot of aromatase and things like that, and which is not really something that you want to be. You don't want to be feminized or anything like that. But if you're someone who's skinny and you're a little bit fat, then what I would always advise is, I keep saying always advise, but what I would advise is kind of embrace the bulk. Like, kind of don't get fat or anything like that because that can be very common. A lot of people, they say I'm bulking and it's just an excuse to eat whatever they want, eat loads of ice cream, eat loads of chocolate, fizzy drinks, crisp. And what happens is after they kind of go on that path, within like 2 months, within about 8 to 10 weeks, they kind of need to go on a mini bulk because they've gotten so fat and they're looking so horrible and ridiculous. They probably feel horrible too. They need to go on a mini cut, mid bulk, and that's just wastes so much time. And it doesn't kill gains, but you could have made so much more progress in that time. So what I would advise is, if you're someone who's skinny with a bit of muscle, kind of embrace it, keep putting on muscle, keep gaining, but gain at a slow pace. Like maybe half a pound to a pound a week. What that will do is it will obviously it will pack on muscle, but the amount of fat you gain will be very minimal. Of course, with the bulk, you're bound to get some kind of fat because gaining muscle is very, very slow, especially if you're a natural lifter. And if you're someone who's been training for a while as well. Gaining muscle can be slow, but as long as you gain muscle on a bulk slowly, you don't need to ramp up your calories by 1,000. You only need to do about 200 to around 500 calories. You should start off with 200 and then weigh yourself pretty much every week, maybe even every other day. See what kind of progress you're making. Note down what kind of lifts you're having too. If you're someone who's bulking and your lifts are horrible, then you need to tweak it a bit. Once if you're eating more calories, your lift should be good, your pump should be good, you should have a lot of energy, your muscles should be full. And essentially that's literally what causing the muscle growth, because once you're heavier, you have the ability to lift more weight. As you get more heavier, you'd have the ability to lift even more weight, and then that goes to a certain point. Now you need to have a certain amount of weight that you want to hit. So if you're someone who's like 60 kilograms, your bulk weight might be, I don't know, 68 kilograms, 72 kilograms, something like that. And then once you hit that weight, you stay at that weight. You exhaust all the strength gains you can, and then eventually after like 9 to maybe 14 months, well, I wouldn't put a range on it, but after a certain amount of months, you're probably like, you know what, okay, I've exhausted all the gains, let me start trimming down. Now this is the most important part, because if you trim down and you're like, you know what, I'm tired of being fat and puffy, and you start cutting your calories by 1,000, then all that hard work you've done, all the sacrifice you've made of being bulky, or on having that puffy face, of having them man boobs or whatever, that's all down the drain. You've literally wasted all your time, because odds are you've cut out all that muscle, all that strength you've made, just to kind of go back to the physique you have. And even worse, if you don't do it properly, you'll probably have a worse physique than you started before the bulk. You'll probably have a skinny fat physique, probably lose a lot of muscle, probably face probably looks messed up, your hormones are messed up. And it's important when you do a bulk, you're properly committed to it. It's, in theory, it's like, you know what, I get to eat more, I get to, eat whatever I want, train as hard as I want. The important part is trimming down. That's literally most. If I were to give you a guide of how to bulk and what to do, that's what I would do. That's how I would do it. Now, if you're on the other side of the spectrum, you're like, I've got a fair amount of muscle for whatever age you are. And you're like, you know what, I've not been lean since, I don't know, since you were a teenager. Or maybe you've never been lean, you've just been a bit of a fat guy, right? Then you would start leaning down. And the easiest way you start leaning down is you know how I said, start bulking up with having 200 to 250 calories. You would do the same thing. Start cutting about 200 to 250 calories, start fasting, make sure your insulin's good. And then eventually, once you start cutting your calories from 200 to 250, you start losing a lot of water weight, and then you would bump up your deficit to 500 calories. Now, a pound of fat has 3,500 calories per day. Like, if you were to, get to that amount a week, you would just have to, reduce your calories by 500. So from Monday to Sunday, say you're on a 500 calorie deficit, by the end of that week, you would have lost 1 pound of fat, provided obviously your calories are literally 500 in the deficit and you have the right amount of protein. And then eventually, say for example, you exhaust all that. You're like, you know what, I've lost a pound of fat for say 6 weeks, and you look really good, right? Because if you're losing 6 pounds of fat off your body, right, and nothing else, it'll make a massive difference. Even though it's just 6 pounds on the scale, it'll make a huge difference. And then what you could do is you could start ramping up the cardio. So if you're someone who walks around say 8k steps, bump that up to 10k steps. Have more NEAT, so which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which basically means how active you are outside of the gym. So maybe you could walk around a bit more. If you go to the mosque, or if you go to like a grocery store or something, try and walk it instead of taking the car, or park your car a little bit further. That's what I do in the gym as well sometimes. In the gym, go in the cardio, go in the sauna, try and burn more calories, because they get to a point where you don't want to cut loads more calories than you've already been consuming. So say if you're someone who consumes 3,000 calories, right? Or let's just say 2,500 calories, which is usually the standard for someone who's fairly active. And say you cut your calories from 2,500 to 1,800. Then it's like, if you cut more and more calories, then you probably just won't want to do it. Simply, that's a lot of the time people just don't want to cut more calories, and it's a lot of the time it holds people back. But people don't know that you can start doing more cardio, these little tips. That you can start having apple cider vinegar before you go sleep. That will reduce your insulin. Because of that, you'll go into fat burning mode straight away. When you're sleeping, you're in ketosis. So when you wake up in the morning, you'll probably be a little bit, you'll probably weigh a little bit less. Your food will be better digested. Your skin will, you'll feel more tight. You feel more dry, which is not in a bad way though. If you're cutting weight and you feel tight and dry, then it's a good sign, because it means that you're not holding a lot of water. So yeah, if that's literally how you would kind of cut, and how you would progress your cut. You would start with a 500 calorie deficit, 250 to kind of exhaust a water weight. Then you would bump it up to 500 calories. And that's not a massive difference. That's like you don't eat a chocolate, or you don't eat like a slice of bread or something. It's very easy. It's very easy. You just and it's very sustainable too, because once you do that 500 calorie deficit, try and train in the same way too. People be like, you know what, I'm gonna start cutting, so let me ramp up the weights, ramp up like the amount of reps you do, and they lower the weight. So that's a recipe for muscle loss because your muscles are not getting that stimulus when they need it the most. Make sure you get enough protein too, because especially on the cut, it's more desirable for you, not for the body, but it's desirable for you because what the protein will do is it'll make you hold onto the muscle, retain the muscle. If you're someone who's on a cut and your body's trying to shed weight, it will go for the muscle first because the fat is what the body needs to survive. A fat, in terms of famine and whatnot, the body will try and preserve it. So make sure you're getting the right amount of protein in because your muscle can be sacrificed if your protein is not up there. And if you're someone who's like, which I said before, you've kind of exhausted the amount of weight you can lose at 500 calories. Maybe if you're like, you know what, I can maybe cut something else out, like say coffee. You have some kind of milk in your coffee, you cut out the milk, which you're not really a big massive fan of anyway, like me. Then you can cut that out, or just simply just start walking, or get a walking pad, which is a massive hack. I've got a walking, it's actually over there somewhere. I've got a walking pad, and what I do is before I go sleep, or even when I'm doing work, I'll basically put it under my desk. I've got a standing desk. I just put a button on it and on the kind of lift up. I'll put it underneath my desk. Even if you're watching something, you can start walking for like 10, 15, 20 minutes. And it goes a long way, especially when you're cutting, it goes a massive long way because the next day you'll wake up and you're like, you know what? I've not even done anything different. I've not done anything strenuous. I'm not sore. I'm not tired. And now all of a sudden you're a couple of pounds lighter. And another thing to be careful of, boys, last thing, is if you're losing weight and if you're gaining weight too quickly, then be a bit wary because if you're losing weight too quickly, it can be muscle. So make sure you're getting the right amount of protein in. And if you're gaining muscle too quickly, aim for around about 1 to 2.5 pounds a week in terms of gainage. If you're gaining more than that, then kind of cut your calories back because odds are it'll be a lot of fat. Now, initially you might think, it's only 2.5 pounds, but say you're bulking for about a couple of months and you're putting on 2.5 pounds every week. That's like a kilogram every single week, and you'll be about 15 kilograms heavier within 15 weeks, which is a bit ridiculous. So make sure you're careful of that, boys. And if you have a proper breakdown of how to train, how to eat, and how to sleep, then join my free school community. The link will be in the description below, the first one. Click on that. Thank you.